Let's do it.
Let's do it. We're live. Hi, and welcome everyone to this SAP Community call. We have some updates to share. With me is Eduardo Schmidhausen and Daniel Ingenhag, who are both product managers for SAP Data Intelligence. And yeah, I think some of you know them. They're quite around the community for quite some time. And yeah, without further ado, if you have any questions, I know we're a little bit late, but that's fine. Post them in the chat. I see someone already has shared their greetings. Hello from Toronto. Hello back from Germany. And yeah, by the way, my name is Menina Chow. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous at the moment because it's hot, and it's really nice that we can have this live stream with Eduardo and Daniel. I'm very excited because they have the latest updates about SAP Data Intelligence. So with that, I'm happy to hand over to the both of you.
Thank you very much, Menina, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining and watching our session. So Daniel and I will share with you the latest and greatest of enhancements of DI 2022-05, which came out end of May. So the first slide, we'll have our agenda, and then we'll give you an overview of what we'll have today. So our call today is divided into 4 main parts. We'll get started with the key enhancements slider with a summary of what we will get deeper into each of the sections, right? It's we divide our enhancements in. So as you can see, metadata governance, administration, intelligent processing, connectivity and integration, and pipeline modeling. And then in the third part, Daniel will share with us a great demo with more information about data intelligence and where you can find more details. And of course, Q&A at the end. So let's go to the overview. And you will see on one slider what we have in store for you. So I will not go through each and every one of these, right? But these are the 5 main areas that we have our enhancements and that we delivered last month. So let's get started with metadata and governance. And we will share with you then what was delivered. So if we go with the first enhancement, and so this is all around our Metadata Explorer. So the first enhancement, the keyword here is reuse. So this is the validation rules operator, then integrate with Metadata Explorer. And the description here is ability for a modeler to build a pipeline graph, use, right, trusted Metadata Explorer's validation and quality rules. And you can execute a rule from pipeline and reuse the rules within rule operator. And the benefits is that the validation and quality rules created and defined by a subject matter expert in Metadata Explorer by a modeler in pipeline. So you have the ability to run books in a pipeline, send pass and failed records to respective targets, and that allows the subject matter expert to fix a failed record and improve the quality of the data. And you have the ability to collaborate, right, between data stewards, subject matter experts, and modelers, developers. and you can quickly use rules in a pipeline without having to create rules from scratch. So you can see here on the right-hand side some examples of this enhancement. And if we go to the next slide, we'll have the second enhancement, and that has to do with public APIs for metadata exchange. On the right-hand side, you can see a screenshot of our API Business Hub. And this is Metadata Management Cloud Edition, as you can see there in the picture. And the description here is you have the ability to export out metadata explorers. You can do that for lineage information of data sets, including relations with other data sets, use transformations and computations, schema information, descriptions as well. And the main values and benefits here is that you have the ability to use and use it and export it for your plot graphs to visualize lineage information based on organizational needs and requirements. And also you can reuse those descriptions and annotations. And now moving to the last enhancement of the metadata governance section. Here you have a summary of what was added in the latest release. So these are the expanded functionality of supported sources. So this is what we support more now in this release. So we can get started on the left hand side, the column there, connection. You can see that HANA Data Lake DB rules are now supported, right? You can see they're new in DI 2022-05. And HANA Data Lake files, so HDL files. Now we also support rules as well. And brand new, we have at the bottom Teradata. And there we support browsing, fact sheet, and preview. And we have a link at the bottom with a complete list of the supported sources besides these new ones that we are sharing with you now. So in a nutshell, this word enhancements for metadata. And now to administration. The next slide will show you the enhancement. And here we make available the encryption of data using customers. So here on the right-hand side, you have a glimpse. And the description is that you can integrate your SAP Data Custodian Key Management Service and SAP Data Intelligence. And this is supported for new DI Cloud instances created in AWS, where an SAP Data Custodian Key Management Service instance is available. And this feature can be enabled during the creation of a new DI instance. And you have the option to provide an existing data custodian key reference to be used in the new DI instance. And the great benefit is that it increases the flexibility to use your own encryption keys. So this is really a nice enhancement that we made available for you all. And if we now move to the next slide, we will share what was delivered with intelligent processing. And if we go to the next slide, you will see that what we delivered is a standalone Jupyter Lab notebook. So then you can create a notebook on your Jupyter app without having to go through Machine Learning Scenario Manager, MLSM. So then you can use your Jupyter Lab for EDA which is exploratory data analysis, for data pre-processing, for data manipulation, and you can do that without a hard dependency on machine learning scenario manager, as I mentioned. And the key benefits here is that the Jupyter app has its own tile, as you can see on the screen there on the screenshot, in our Launchpad. So it is there available directly for you to use it. And it enables the usage independently of the ML scenario manager without necessarily having an effect in any of existing scenarios in machine learning scenario manager. And it's associated the Jupyter Lab notebooks to, you can associate a Jupyter Lab notebook to an existing machine learning scenario, as you can see on the screenshots. So in a nutshell, this was the enhancement for intelligent processing. And now I hand over to you, Daniel, to continue with the other innovations.
Thank you, Eduardo. So yeah, let's directly move on and let's see what's new in connectivity and integration that we want to share with you with our latest innovations. And when we look at it, let's maybe first see, okay, because of course there are a lot of connectivity requests coming in from, let's say, all of our customers, partners, and so on. And what we have now delivered is a new connectivity to Teradata. That means that we have now a new connection type that is available in our connection management application. And you can also, let's say, see it in our administration guide on our help documentation, which now allows us to connect to Teradata at the first glance as a source. So that means it's basically kind of a first step. And we just go through a little bit to the capabilities now just in a second on the right-hand side. So when you are, for example, now in the connection management, like we can see it on the upper left screenshot, you can now select the Teradata database connection that is available as a connection type. And if you want to create one, that's kind of follow the existing patterns that we have. You need to define an ID, an optional description. Then you need to specify the version. Here we basically made sure that, let's say, the latest version is available, which is basically 17.x that can be consumed and integrated with data intelligence. And then, of course, these are, let's say, the typical connection parameters like a host, then a port, the database name in this case, and username and password. And what is also important, of course, in our DI Cloud environment is also the support via SAP Cloud Connector, so that you can just, let's say, leverage existing Cloud Connector connections you might have, for example, against MS SQL, Oracle, or you name it. And the qualities, that just a quick recap of what Eduardo already shared with you. In the Metadata Explorer, we basically now enabled a basic set of features. That means you can browse inside the Teradata connection. You can basically let you show the metadata, so the columns, its types, so the data types of the respective columns, and you can perform a data preview for tables that are available in Teradata. Of course, that's something we are also looking into based on feedback from all of you that are now basically watching us, but also others, where we can extend the usage, for example, in the Metadata Explorer. And when we look now on, let's say, the actual data integration extraction perspective, we basically support this connection type in some of our operators. And here we focused at the first glance to support it in our generation 2 operators in pipelines. That means you can, at the one hand, you can just use our table consumer that you might know, where you can select the table and extract the data. But you can also use it in our SQL consumer. That means if you have maybe a more complex selection that you want to do, you can, instead of just selecting the table and get everything out of the table, you can define a SQL statement to maybe already filter or have a more, let's say, kind of a aggregated data that you already want to extract out of the source. And then we, in addition, have not only the SQL consumer, but also our SQL executor operator that you probably also know. So there are, let's say, some capabilities where we have now introduced for the new connection type, but it's something that we also look into if we then enhance that in future. If you now go on, that was, let's say, now the general connectivity topic, also, let's say, looking on new connectivity in the pipelines. But some of you may also have heard about this new mass data replication enhancement feature we have delivered initially in the end of February with our DI Cloud solution. And here we have also offered some different, let's say, innovations. And one of them is for this new, let's say, mass data replication enhancements, or we call it replication flows. That's kind of the name if you not had heard about it in our tooling. And what we have delivered here is new target connectivity. And in this case, we support write data into Google Cloud Storage. If you may remember, we have started with AWS S3 and Azure Data Lake Gen 2. Now, as a target, we also support Google Cloud Storage that can be used against each and every source system that we support already of the moment. So there is, let's say, no limitation which kind of source system can be used. I think that's also something that we would take as granted, so to say. And what we can see is that you can now, let's say, select the existing GCS connection type that you have maybe already defined in your connection management as a target connection. And then you can basically make use of all of the different features. So for example, you can select this group delta by option if you want to have the delta data somehow being grouped, or for example, on a daily basis. And you also can select different file types, where we also have an update just in a second. And you can also, of course, then select the maybe file-specific parameters like the compression. And on the right-hand side, it's basically on the task level. So if you select a single data set, it's kind of behaving as before. So you basically select in the target your kind of, let's say, root folder for the specific data set that you want to load. Yeah, so that's kind of, let's say, one of the innovations we wanted to share with you. And if you now go next, we basically have introduced a second new target connectivity, which is HANA Data Lake files that we were already supporting in data intelligence before, but it was mainly could be used inside the Metadata Explorer, now with some enhancement that Eduardo shared already, but we also used it already, for example, in specific operators and pipelines. But now this has also been enabled as a target system in replication flows. And again, it's basically can make use of all of the available features. So it can connect to each and every source system like the Azure SQL DB, but also the SAP systems like S/4HANA Cloud on-premise that we support as of today. You can also make use of the various different, let's say, options you can define. And it's, yeah, basically exactly behaving the same like we have seen now for GCS, or also the connections around S3 and ADL Gen 2. But what we have already teasered a little bit in the description, and also you can see it here in the file type, is we have not only provided, let's say, new connections, but what we have also seen is that there is a need also to support additional target file types. Some of you may remember who tried it out. We support CSV, we support Parquet, and now we have introduced also JSON and JSON lines. So when you now create a replication flow, you want to set it up, you have any cloud storage being defined as the target. If you now open up the file type drop down, you will see now, in addition to CSV and Parquet, which was there from the early beginning, you can now also select JSON and JSON lines as well, because that was requested by some of our customers that are also interested in additional file types as well. And there is one specific information or let's say variant that is popping up when you select the file type JSON. You will see that there are two different orients of the JSON that you can choose, which is records and values. And some of you may have already seen that because that's already available in our pipelines. So if you, for example, are working in generation 2 pipelines and operators, you want to, let's say, load data into a file store, and you have this table to binary operator that is also providing kind of the same. So if you select JSON in here, you also have the option to define different orients. So we basically try to keep a unified experience here for you if you come from a pipeline and you now want to explore for the similar use case replication flows, that we basically try to follow the same pattern so you can more easily adopt the case. I know there are some orients missing, so we do not have the complete list available as of now, but that's something we are also heading to. Right. That's about it for the replication flows as such. And if we now look at this, let's say, overview slide, so that's something we have also shared when we had the initial release with replication flows, and that is basically now kind of an updated version. So you basically see on the left-hand side, it's basically more or less the same. So we have the integration of the various different SAP systems, S/4HANA on-premise, cloud, the ECC systems or SLT, and Azure MS SQL, like I said. So that's kind of the same, but now on the right-hand side, we can see that we have now GCS and HCA files also available, and to support additional target systems, including the file types that I just talked about. And I mean, that's kind of an ongoing story. Of course, we want to grow. We want to bring in new connectivities on the source system side, on the target system side, but also looking on enhancing the functionality. So that's something we basically do stepwise, one after the other, because if you compare it with other toolings that we have in our portfolio and are there for 10 plus years, of course, that's something we cannot do from one quarter to the other, but that's something we basically then continuously will do over time. All right, if we now move on, something is wrong with my mouse. There we go. We have also a recent feature in the pipeline modeling area, and that is actually also related to replication flows. The background is we received also a lot of input from customers coming from, for example, the area that they use our pipeline functionalities for realizing also replication use cases. And what they have claimed quite a lot is, especially if you have very huge data sets with maybe a few hundred of millions of records, and you have rather small files being generated on your target object store, that ended up in quite a mess of files. Because if we maybe consider a few megabyte per file, if you then multiply it with all of the hundreds of millions of rows, that can actually end up in thousands or maybe 10,000s of files that are then, of course, continuously growing. If we consider also real-time data extraction, where data is continuously being feeded into your object store and then creating files basically every second, for example. And therefore, we basically got the ask to provide a way to also support its larger files, so that we have not maybe a few megabyte, but maybe one file could have 200, 300, 400 megabyte, so that we try to not come up in a mess of files, but try to manage that a little bit. We have already started some investigations here to see what does it cost us, what approaches we could have, but it's also not that easy, but rather complex, especially when you look at the real-time behavior, where you want to ensure data is coming at the point of time and not waiting for example, 5 minutes until a certain file size threshold is reached. And we are still doing some investigation here to provide something meaningful. And in order to, let's say, do not, let's say, wait for, let's say, long-term feature, we provided some functionality as kind of an intermediate solution, which is this, let's say, merging part files graphs. So these graphs that we see here, they have been shipped with the last release that we are currently looking at, and they can be used as an interim solution and can be found also in the repository in Data Intelligence, which allows you to already merge smaller files into bigger ones, where you can define also the file size, like we can see it on the right-hand side, for both the initial load. Once it is done, you can trigger that pipeline and then defining your source, your target connection, the path, and then you can also define your minimum file size limit. You can execute it, and then it's kind of merging these smaller files into bigger ones. So kind of achieving the same, but with some more manual approach. In the end, we want to have it fully automated somewhere in the future. But like I said, it still takes us some time to achieve it. And if we now, let's say, see at the different scenarios, it's currently possible for CSV to CSV and Parquet to Parquet. We will also now look into supporting it for JSON and JSON lines as well. That's something, let's say, on our agenda, maybe currently checking when we can deliver it. So it's basically always between the same file format and not cross-checking it. But on the other hand, it can also be seen as kind of a template. So you can, for example, use it how it is, let's say, being delivered as of now, but you're also, of course, free to change it. So if you have maybe some different needs or maybe something else, you can basically adjust it based on your needs and run it in another way. And we are also, in addition to the official help documentation we have for this feature, we are also currently preparing a blog post that is providing some more detailed description that should also be published soon about this feature. And what is also quite nice is, like I said, that we do not only offer it for the initial load, but also for the delta load. So that means if you have now a continuously running replication flow that is producing data in real time, you can schedule this merger graph that is then, for example, once a day, twice a day, whatever you like, then kind of merging also the delta files together. So that's quite nice. You can automate it to, let's say, have it run in a certain frequency, and you can see it on the bottom side. There are some examples where we had, for example, a scenario with 65 part files with around 10 MB, and after we have, for example, run those graphs, we could see that this has been reduced up to 14 part files with around 200 MB. Just maybe to let you know, it's not always coming up to each file being exactly 200 MB, especially in the Parquet format. We might have some deviation in place, so there might be, let's say, plus minus a few percent how big the file is, but it's kind of the nature of the Parquet file and the compression that's being done. But in the end, I think it's quite a great value that we can offer it already now. You can automate it, and then we will try to bring that in a more automated fashion in the future at some point. Right. That was already it from the content perspective. I would now switch over to provide a quick demo for you. So I will just quickly stop sharing and go into my data intelligence system. I will just basically do a very quick demo on the replication flow feature itself, but focusing on one of the new target connectivities that we have seen, which is HDL files. And for those of you who might not know it, if I go, for example, here into the connections, we just reuse existing connections we have. So in this case, we have a connectivity against an ECC system that is running on DMIS as a source. And then we have, on the other hand, our HANA data lake files system that is being used as a target. So that's kind of the prerequisite. So we need to have both connections in place. I can also quickly check if the connection status is okay. So this looks good. And what we now do is we enter the modeling environment. And typically on the main page, you would end up here with the graphs and the operators. And for those of you who have who has not yet seen this replication flow functionality, on the left-hand side, there is a new tab that is called Replication. And if you go in here, you can basically create one. You can already see some of them who are, for example, created by another user, and they would also have a symbol here. But in this case, all of the replication flows have been created by the user, which I'm currently logged into. And if I now, for example, select my RF demo ECC, replication flow that I prepared, like I said, we will choose this ECC connection that I just talked about. Then the container, maybe for those of you who are not familiar with it, the container is kind of the logical data set or unit we want to integrate. For example, in case of an S/4HANA system, it's this CDS root folder where all of the CDS views are residing. In case of ECC, it's the SLT and also the respective configuration. So the configuration is kind of a prerequisite that needs to be created on the ECC system that tells us what is the source, and data intelligence is our target. And this has this 3-digit identifier, which is this one here. Right. On the target side, we select HDL files, like I said. The container is just kind of the root path that you would set where you basically want to load all your data into. And then I can select different options. I can say for the delta, I want to have it grouped, yes or no. If yes, I can do it on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. And on the file type section, I can select which file type do I want to use. In this case, I will choose Paquet. And I can then select if I do want to use any file compression. But for this, I will just skip it. That's kind of the, let's say, main configurations I need to do. And if I then go into the task section, I need to select the actual data sets, in this case, the tables that I want to replicate. And I can click here on Create. And here I basically need to enter a search because the ECC system has quite a lot of tables in it. So I can search, for example, for that is this NetWeaver demonstration data model that is sitting in nearly every SAP system, as far as I know, that you can use. And it has also been used at TechEd, for example, if you want to have maybe a more detailed look into it. And here we have various different data assets that I could select or even multi-select and add it to my tasks. In this case, I have chosen sales order items, the products table, so kind of the product master data, and the purchase orders. Then I can select my target. So this would be kind of this part file folder under the demo section, which is here. And I can basically also manipulate the name. By default, it is reusing the name from the source. In this case, I can just leave it as is. And the load type, I can switch between initial only and initial and delta. In this case, I also want to perform delta load. And then I can also hit the truncate button. For example, imagine your data set is already existing and you want to clean it up before running it again. This basically needs to be hit, similar to a database. If you don't want to get into any unique constraint violations, you basically also need to truncate the table before you reload the data. Optionally, you can define also some filters, for example, on specific columns that are then being displayed on the bottom. But in this case, I would just leave it as is. So, I mean, there are different operators for filters you can use. But in this case, I want to load all of the data, and optionally, I can also perform some mapping. If I'm not interested in all of the columns, I can remove them or can also, let's say, change the naming and so on. So some basic mapping capabilities, but in this case, I also leave it as is. And what I can now do is I can do a quick validation. So it's just checking the basic tasks. Do I have everything set up correctly? And if I click on it, we can see everything is okay, it's in green. So we are good to go. And we can hit the deploy button. What the deploy button is actually doing, it is creating certain runtime objects under the hood that are required in order to start a replication, and it's also performing some checks. So if something is not configured or cleaned up correctly, there could also some errors or even warnings coming up to basically make you as user aware that something is wrong that needs to be checked before you can actually execute it. We can now see here deployment is completed. Everything is good. So we are good to go to execute it. So let's do it. So we can see here it has now started. Right, so it says prepare run completed, and we can now see here on the status icon that this is running, and we can also see this on the left-hand side. So this nice little sticky person, if you want to call it like this, is now also running. So that means it actually has been executed, and we can now switch over to the monitoring via this button. And this will take us to the monitoring. And this is actually, when you come to it, it's the general monitoring tile that you also know if you, for example, monitor your pipelines or that you execute from your user, for example. That's actually kind of the very same entry page. And what we have now introduced is a new tab that is called Replications. And this replication tab will basically give you information about all the replication flows. So there are some others here being used, but we can also see our RF demo ECC replication flow, and we also see some metrics. So we see what is the source connection, what is the car connection, the target connection, how many data sets have we basically added. In this case, we have 3 that we also see on the detailed page. We can watch the load progress, the status, when it was last changed, which user changed it, which is also important if you use it within the same tenant by different users, that you know who has maybe last changed it, and when it was created and by whom was it created. I think just some high-level information I think everybody knows and would expect in such an environment. And if we now look at it and refresh it, we see also a detailed page where we can see some detailed information. So we see the source and target dataset name that we basically get from here. So the source and the target, in this case, it's the same. Just need to, there is this control from Zoom. Right. Then we have operations partitions. We will soon, I mean, that's a demo system. Therefore, it's taking some time. That should soon be updated with some figures. We have the load type, start, initial load, end time, and the duration for the initial load. And runtime updated basically gives an information also, for example, when the last change record was received. And if we refresh that, but right now it's really taking quite some long time. Usually it should not take that long, but that's kind of the typical effect. Everything works well before the live session, and now it's making up some problems. Okay. Yeah, let's see if some runtime information is coming up. I see maybe just for the amount of time. So sorry for that. I'm not sure. Okay, now it's moving, but it's basically a little bit slower. Yeah, we can now see here by hitting the refresh button that it's going through different status information. So we saw first it was setting up specific target objects, for example, the folder for each of the data sets, and it's now starting to partition the initial load. And once that is done, it should also start actually replicating data. But it looks like there is some problem. Oh no, there we go. So we have, for example, the product table that was now is in transferring initial load data. So we can see around 123 records being replicated, and that's already it. I mean, it's just for demo purposes. We see the initial load is done. We have 123 records that have been transferred, and transferring delta load now means it is waiting for changes. As soon as a change is done in the source system, for example, a new product is being added or changed or deleted, this will be captured and then also moved into a respective file in HDL files. And we can then also see the operations count going up and the runtime being updated. Right, so yeah, something's wrong with the other 2 data sets. Oh no, it's coming now with 300 records, slowly but surely. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to show based on the new connection type we have introduced on how a quick end-to-end demo looks like for our replication flow feature. And that was kind of the last part of what we want to show you today. I've quickly tried to also have a look at the chat, but it looks like there are no questions coming up, or maybe it's not refreshing on my end. But yeah, that would be it from what we want to show today.
Thanks for the demo and thanks for the presentation. Very insightful. Yeah, currently there are no questions in the chat, but of course everyone is warmly invited to take the opportunity and ask questions to the speakers while we are still around live.
Of course.
Maybe a few questions from my side. First one is, yeah, I mean, we're already excited for the next release. So when is that coming? The updates, and can you share insights if there's anything you can share?
Eduardo, do you want to go, or should I?
Even for
I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, you mean for the next release besides this one?
Yeah,
You were saying? Yeah. Okay.
Just
So the
we know
next
when
one will be
expected.
Yeah, in August. So for the cloud release, we had this one that we were just sharing now in May, and the next one is coming out in August. And also in August, besides the next cloud release, we will also have an on-premise release, which will pack together then what we have just shown now, together with what will come out in the cloud release of August. So that's also coming out in August, the on-premise release.
Cool, thanks. And just to confirm with the audience, will intelligent processing area, will that continue to be supported in SAP Data Intelligence Cloud?
So yes, it will continue to be supported. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Good. Then let me check the chat. So few comments here, very helpful demo, thank you. And a question, could we just see files in HDL? Hi, Vitaly.
Of course, yeah, I've already switched the part here. So we have here basically our demo folder, and here we could now see also the files that we generated. So we have, for example, the product table, the purchase order table. There was even now a sales order table, but that was from another replication, and we have the sales order item. So we have basically the folders here, and I can also basically drill down, and we can see now two different subfolders. One is capturing the initial load data. The other one would basically store all of the delta load data. That's also briefly described in our documentation, how this folder structure, which is automatically being generated, looks like, and it's also explained. If I now go into, oops, okay, I think I've picked the one that was not moving any data. Yeah, exactly. Let's look on the purchase order table, where we also have data in. The other one is still having some problems, which I currently cannot explain. So if you go into purchase order, go into initial load, we can see one part file. I mean, it's only 300 records. So if you have larger tables, you would, of course, see also larger files. But if you, for example, go into that file, we will see also the different columns that are coming from the source. There are also some technical columns that we use for internal processing, especially when we want to recover from a crash. And we can also have a look into the data by the data preview, where we can also see then the actual data that was replicated. Right. Yep, that's how it looks like.
Good, thanks. Then we're definitely looking forward for the blog post to be published. I think we shared the most important links in the chat to both of your profiles, as well as to the community topic page for SAP Data Intelligence Cloud, where you can find more information. And of course, are welcome to ask questions if you have any coming up after this call. I think Daniel and Eduardo are around, but also lots of other community members that can help. Yeah, with that, I think we can wrap it up and say goodbye. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good. I've just basically put our last slide where you can also get further information, like you already said it, that we have basically now our community links, email address, but also all of the, let's say, very useful links about the blog post, use cases, and so on. That would be, I think, very interesting and yeah, helpful for you.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll upload or share the link to this presentation in the description of this call, but also on the community. And just checking chat, we do have a few more questions, so maybe we can take those as well.
Of course.
Yeah, Vitaly asked, I'm not familiar with JSON-L format. How is it different from a regular JSON?
Yeah, I mean, that's just, let's say, kind of an enhanced format. So it's basically not one JSON object per file, but with JSON lines, you can, for example, have different JSON objects within one file. So you have not just one big JSON that could be, of course, kind of deeply nested, but you could have basically several JSON items within one file that are, for example, comma separated. And for example, it could be one row or many different rows in the JSON format being in one JSON line format. But if you like, I mean, there's, I think, also quite a lot of public information available about it. What is the exact difference? But this is kind of in a nutshell. And I also see a question from Jacob. Yeah, that's a very good question and a very important one that we have also seen and also got a lot of feedback where we are in contact with the development team to improve that, because currently it is very limited for an end user to troubleshoot when replication flow failed. So we have, let's say, sometimes not a good error message, frankly speaking. And we are looking into it already in development, how this can look like, and we can improve it in the future. It will probably be a multi-step approach. For example, we are now concretely looking into providing more, let's say, more error messages. Also, let's say, from the history perspective, that you have, let's say, many different lines talking about the error messages, and try to, of course, also improve the error message itself to make clear what went wrong. And then also beyond that, we want to, similar like we know it for pipelines, where you can download this diagnostic information, we also want to have something in place in the future as well for the replication flows. So once a problem occurs, you want to check it, and maybe you not even know how to proceed, you need to log in support incident, that we simplify the access to the relevant logs for either their own troubleshooting or provided for the support, and also in future, for example, have something like a debugging mode, like we have introduced it also for pipelines at some point of time. So we are aware of it. We try to improve it stepwise to make that experience better.
Great, thank you. All right. If there are no further questions, then I would really say now, thank you very much for your attention, Daniel and Eduardo, for your time, for everyone who showed up, also for those asking the questions and commenting in chat, very appreciated. I also added again a link to the community page where you can just browse on already asked questions. Maybe there's something that's also interesting to you, as well as where you can find the blog posts. Okay, then have a good rest of day, everyone. We hope to see you in one of the next community calls. And yeah, have a good day. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for watching in.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.